Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Dose of Sass. It's been a minute since I put out an episode because I had some technical difficulties and then I was traveling. And so I just said, give me a second. But I'm back. Today I want to talk about foods, but not like my relationship with food. Well, a little bit about my relationship with food, but more like my food preferences and being a picky eater as an adult and safe and unsafe foods. I'm going to cover all of it. I've always been a picky eater. I was a picky eater as a kid. If you know, you know, the Zoo Pals plates were my favorite because none of your foods touch. I've always liked really plain things. I've never liked to try new foods. And unfortunately, this is a trait that I've never grown out of. And it is like my least favorite trait of all time. I really don't like this about myself. I wish I was more willing to try new foods, but I'm genuinely afraid of them most of the time. Especially if I'm like out at a restaurant, I'm not gonna, you have one chance, one meal that you're ordering. If I don't like it, I'm not gonna order another thing, especially if I'm with a group of people. I'm not gonna admit that I don't like it. So you bet I'm gonna order something that I'm familiar with. And if we're going to a restaurant I'm not familiar with, I am so stressed. I'm looking up the menu, trying to figure out if there's any semblance of anything I can eat on there that sounds familiar. And if there's not, I'm probably going to suggest somewhere else. That's the kind of person I am. I am a 26-year-old picky eater. I feel like I'm at an AA meeting. Hi, I'm Kaitlyn. I'm a 26-year-old picky eater. I like what I like, and I really struggle when I run into something that I like. I don't like it anymore. This is where things become from safe foods to unsafe foods, and I'll get into what that means. If I'm like really hyper fixated on a specific meal and then all of a sudden it just doesn't hit the same, that's really scary because now I have to find a new thing to like. If I have my mind set on, and here's the thing, I think this also comes from a little bit of my diet culture and eating disorder history. Because here's the thing, when you're in a disordered relationship with food of any kind, your thoughts are just fully thinking about food and weight and body at all times. There's never a thought of my day that went by that I wasn't thinking about food. And so I'm thinking at all times, what am I going to have for breakfast? What am I going to have for lunch? What am I going to have for dinner? And if that doesn't go according to plan, not only is my whole like made up food rules for the day thrown out of whack, but also add on top of that, I'm a picky eater. Like I'm in a world of trouble at this point. I remember times of being on a diet and like my husband would know that I was following certain food rules and I would suggest something for dinner that I had already decided in my brain, you know what, screw it, I'm going to have that for dinner. And then he would go, "Wait, does that fall into your plan? Like is that something you can eat?" And then I would get all defensive about it and try to argue with him. Yeah, like yeah, it does. Like don't worry about it. Or no, it doesn't, but who cares? Like and then he, trying to be a good husband and support me at the time and the decisions I was making, would, come back and be like, well, we could do something else. Or what about this that might fit? Or some alternate idea. But I'd already thought all day about, screw it, I'm going to ruin my diet at dinner. And that's what I want. And any suggestion otherwise is going to put me into a spiral that it's really hard to recover from that. Now that I know I'm in a place where I can eat anything I want for dinner, there are no rules. I listen to my body, I honor my health. There are still times where I have a certain meal in mind, and the suggestion to do otherwise can really throw me off. I wish I was more spontaneous. I wish I was more adventurous like that. And maybe that's just picky eater things. Maybe that's history of disordered relationship with food things. Maybe it's all of the above. Maybe it's something else that's undiagnosed. But while my thoughts today aren't of what can and can't I eat, there are still a lot of thoughts about what sounds good, what can I have, what do I have? If I'm suddenly craving something and I don't have it, can I get it? Like, there's still kind of a lot of pressure there. Thankfully, it doesn't come with guilt these days, but it is still a little bit stressful. And I've been doing this series on my Instagram called Safe Foods Report, where I dive into what's hidden for me lately, what's in, what's out with foods and meals. And whenever I share this, I always get the question of what does that mean? What are safe foods? And I'm answering it in this episode because it doesn't really have a clear-cut answer. It's kind of complicated and it's kind of unique to an individual. And it's not very straightforward. If you've had any history in diet culture, then your relationship with food is probably like many, many, many layers of complicated rules that you don't even know where they came from. Like, if you've spent so many years of your life having various rules about what you can and can't eat, when and where and how much and why, then starting to like peel back those rules, figure out where they came from, identify them. Some of them are super subconscious. Some of them you might not even realize you're doing. That process is messy and it takes a really long time. And sometimes they can sneak up on you. You can have rules that you've made up for yourself around food that you didn't even realize you were doing because you've been doing them for so long that you're like, until somebody points it out or somebody makes a comment or a memory is jogged. And so there may be foods generally that you've deemed unsafe, quote unquote, for whatever reason that you're actually not even sure where that rule comes from anymore. So a lot of this has roots in diet culture. It also has roots in neurodivergency. And I'm going to give a big caveat here to say I am not diagnosed ADHD, autistic, anything clinically. I do think that there's some kind of neurodivergency happening in this brain of mine, but I don't know what it is and I have never been diagnosed with anything. So I take everything that I say with a grain of salt. And I don't mean what I say to apply to all neurodivergent people. This is still going to be reflective of my personal experience. But having safe and unsafe foods is a characteristic of a lot of neurodivergent people. It also is a characteristic that stems from having past disorder relationship with food or eating disorder. Fear foods, if you will. Fear foods is very common in eating disorder behaviors. Foods that you're afraid if you eat, you're going to gain weight, or if you eat, you're going to go off the deep end, or if you eat, you're going to lose control in some way, shape, or form. And that may play a role in someone's unsafe foods. That's not what plays a role in my current unsafe foods because I've healed my relationship with food and body. But that's also, if you hear someone talk about unsafe foods or fear foods, that's also where that comes from. So it's multi-layered. It's got diet culture roots. It's got eating disorder roots. It's got neurodivergent roots. There's also this thing called ARFID. ARFID is avoidant/restrictive food intake disorder. It's fairly new. It's more common in children, but can be common in adults. And it's just very selective behaviors around foods. I think normally it's been categorized as like being a picky eater growing up, which I very much was. And I'm not entirely convinced that I don't have this, but I might. But what it is you have really negative or strong reactions towards certain foods, food textures, food colors, smells, tastes, a fear of trying new foods. It can often be an uninterest in food in general, a lack of appetite. What falls under ARFID as well can also be like a fear of what's going to happen when you eat, a fear of vomiting or a fear of choking. People with ARFID often also have anxiety or OCD or ADHD or autism. Like these kind of often go hand in hand with other disorders. So that's why I say it kind of falls under the neurodivergent category. I'm not diagnosing you. I'm not diagnosing myself. But that's kind of like generally where this safe and unsafe food thing comes from. For me, when I'm sharing safe foods, my safe foods report on the internet, I'm talking about foods that are like hitting the spot for me right now. My absolute go-to meals. I get in ruts with things where like the only thing that sounds good for dinner is a specific meal. That's what I would consider a safe food. Or a specific snack, or always craving a certain item. Those are all the things that categorize as safe food for me. Now, what is an unsafe food, or what makes something turn from a safe food to an unsafe food? A few things. I do have sensitivity to like textures, new things. If it's been cooked in a slightly different way than last time, for example, eggs is a really tricky one that can go from safe to unsafe very quickly. If I just like slightly overcook or undercook my eggs and they are either like too wet or too burnt, that can ruin it for me. And I won't be willing to eat eggs for a while. This is why cooking is so stressful for me, because it has to be perfect or else I might not enjoy it. And if I have the inkling that it might not be perfect, then I am nervous to eat it. If I'm trying a new recipe, I always make my husband try it first because I'm like, I don't know how this turned out. Is this how it's supposed to taste? I don't know. Is it good? Maybe. But like, if I feel like maybe I messed up a step at some point, I am absolutely afraid to try it. I don't like to try new foods. I don't enjoy going to new restaurants. I've been trying to be better about this in recent years, and I've been willing to like try a bite of something or like dip something in something. But you won't catch me ordering like a brand new meal from a brand new restaurant. It has to be like close to something I've had before. If I'm going to a new restaurant, you can bet I'm getting like a pasta, a burger, a salad, chicken tenders, like something that falls in a category of something I've had before, and I'm still going to be nervous about it. So a change in the way something was cooked or like a fear around the way it was cooked can turn something from safe to unsafe very quickly. As far as something that's not cooked, like snacks, if there's a change in packaging, that honestly freaks me out a little bit. Recently, I went to buy some Activia yogurt and I noticed that the packaging had changed. And so I was looking at it like, am I 100% sure that this is the right thing that I'm going to get? Because if it's not, I'm going to be screwed. And also, yogurt is already a tricky one because sometimes if I think too hard about what yogurt is, I get really weirded out by it. I have to like eat it in distraction mode so that I don't think too hard about the texture. Shockingly, the one that I eat is this peach Activia yogurt and it has small chunks of peach in it. Normally, that would absolutely ruin my day. I don't like fruit chunks in another textured substance, but this one I don't mind very much because they're not mushy, they're crunchy. But yogurt can very quickly turn into an unsafe food. If I somehow think it looks weird, I'm really afraid of food being bad or spoiled or expired. So if I look at it and it smells slightly different or looks slightly different, I'm like, call it quits. That's unsafe. I'm kind of afraid that this episode is making me sound insane. But I know I'm not alone. Hopefully. Maybe we're all crazy. I also get really attached to specific brands of foods. So there's certain brands of tortillas that I will eat, certain brands of cheese, certain brands of chips, certain brands of fruit. Because I know I like it, I know what to expect. There's less room for error. Another thing that can make a snack unsafe, for example, is like I got a fresh bag of hot Cheetos and all of the hot Cheetos were like really big and I didn't like it. Or if the goldfish get like a little bit stale, I can be really into a meal or a snack for a few days, a few weeks, a few months. I went through a really long phase with English muffins and then one day I decided, nope, that's it for them. And sometimes there's really not a clear-cut answer. That's what's kind of hard about this is like I don't really know what to tell you. Sometimes there's a reason, but sometimes there's really just not, and my brain just decides, nope, that's it for that. Whereas I feel like for a lot of people, and for men especially, at least for my husband, they could eat the same thing every day and be fine. He doesn't have any fears about a meal he's had before. He's not concerned that something's not cooked correctly. Like, must be nice. Something that's just like generally unsafe for me is charcuterie boards. Hot take, I know, because some people just like love charcuterie boards, eat them up, could eat it for every meal. I am afraid of charcuterie boards because here's the thing. I don't know what everything on the board is. I don't like to try new things. I have a toddler's palate, so I like really plain foods. I like pasta, I like chicken tenders, I like chips. Like I like pretty plain flavors. And listen, this is like my least favorite trait about myself. I really wish I wasn't this way because I love seeing other people's meal concoctions and think charcuterie boards are gorgeous, but like I just know I wouldn't eat anything on it. Here's another thing. I'm not combining like cheese and jam on a cracker. Absolutely not. Those are three textures that I don't need to go together. My form of charcuterie board is a pretzel thin, Colby Jack cheese, and turkey. Like plain turkey. See how plain all three of those things are? I don't need fancy cheeses. I definitely don't need creamy cheeses. Absolutely not. That's not the texture cheese should be, in my opinion. I'm not putting fruit and cheese together. No, thank you. They're not going to be touching on my plate, that's for sure. I will be willing to test crackers because for the most part, they're not going to be bad. But I'm definitely not going to have a cracker that has like fruit and nuts in it. So if I don't know what everything is, and I don't want to try new combinations, and everything is touching, absolutely not. Charcuterie board is like an actual nightmare for me. Instead, I make what's called a snack board, where everything's in a separate little container. It's all very neat and organized. I know what everything is. I picked everything out. Nothing crazy is going to happen on this snack board. The other thing about me is I really don't like to cook. I've never enjoyed doing it. I think if I grew up learning to do it from a young age, I might enjoy it more. But for me, whether it's perfectionist, whether it's some kind of neurodivergency I don't know about, whether it's disordered relationship with food history, I don't know what, whether it's just general like lack of cooking knowledge, not trusting my own cooking instincts, I have to follow a recipe to a T. I have to make sure it's correct, perfect. Otherwise, I'm gonna be afraid to eat it, and two, I'm gonna feel like a failure. There's only a couple things that I ever feel comfortable like guessing about, and that's like garlic and vanilla and maybe salt and pepper. Everything else, you have to give me a measurement. You have to tell me how long to stir something. You have to tell me what it's supposed to look like when I pull it out of the oven. Otherwise, I'm going to spend the whole time going, is it right? Is it right? Is it right? I posted a video of me cooking the other day and making this super simple meal. It was like literally just sauce from Trader Joe's, boxed pasta, and chicken. And even just doing all of that and then trying to plan all three of those things to be done correctly at the right time. Absolutely not. I messed that up. I was so stressed. So cooking is never like ooh, fun. I don't think I could ever do something like HelloFresh because I still have to cook it. And you're telling me it relies on me doing it correctly? Absolutely not. And like, I'm not a bad cook. Like, things that I make usually turn out okay. But I'm never comfortable like looking at my pantry and being like, ooh, I'll just whip up some, broccoli chicken pasta. No, I'm Googling. I'm looking on Pinterest. How can I make a pasta out of broccoli and chicken and whatever else I have? There are certain things that I've like absolutely nailed. I've really nailed my scrambled eggs in the morning lately. I know exactly how I want to do it. Really good at making a quesadilla. I can make a mean French toast. But like outside of that, consider me stressed. I'm not out here trying new recipes for fun. That doesn't sound like fun to me. Now, I do actually kind of like baking, but I don't like all the work that goes into it. I love to make like brownies from the box. Excellent. It's like 3 steps. Can't mess it up because everything else that needs to be measured is already in a pre-made package. Love it. I get the cooking bug like maybe once a month. Maybe. And then here's the other thing is I don't like leftovers. I don't like to eat leftovers. If it doesn't taste the same as it did the day before or when it was freshly cooked, I'm not going to eat it. Or if it doesn't look the same. I hate restaurant leftovers. They never look or taste the same. I don't really like reheated pizza, and I definitely don't like cold pizza. Because that's not the way I ate it in the first place, so why would I eat it like that? I like consistency with my food. And if something about it is unclear or inconsistent, or I am unsure about the result, consider it unsafe. And that's why I think I never did really great with meal prepping either. It's because, one, I don't want to eat the same thing multiple days in a row, but also, like, I already cooked it and now you want me to reheat it? It's basically prepped leftovers. Absolutely not. If there's a chance that things are touching, still don't like my foods to touch. This is me. This is this is my relationship with food as an adult. I feel like really childish about it, honestly. I'm kind of embarrassed about it. But I'm hoping I'm not alone. I'm sure I'm not. Every time I talk about safe foods on the internet, somebody's like, yes, that's exactly me. So I'm sure somebody listening to this episode is like, yes, that's exactly me. And if you're not, and you have tips on how to not be this way, I'm all ears. I am. I would love to have the ability to explore other things. But alas, here we are. That's kind of it for today's episode. I'm just chatting. Feel free to DM me on Instagram. Let me know what your safe foods are right now. If you relate to this episode, please let me know because I need to know that I'm not crazy. And if you don't, congratulations. Eating might be easier for you. If you like this episode or you know a friend like this, share it with a friend. Like it, leave a review, rate it on Apple Podcasts so that other people can find this show. And I'll talk to you soon.